Welcome back, Wonders. It's Naidra. So I just got back from my vacation and super excited to jump back into Diablo. Specifically, this is my first time trying out a PTR before the actual season starts. So I wanted to give some feedback. I'm trying out every different character class there is, and I do want to provide feedback on all the ones that I do end up playing. I know we're limited on time, but I still wanted to give some feedback to hopefully improve the experience for when the actual season starts. And so for today's video, we're going to start off with some Sorceress feedback. This is the first character I decided to try out. Sorceress has always been my favorite, so really excited to give this a shot, and also really hopeful that we can keep up with the other character classes such as the Spiritborn. Like I mentioned in my previous video, what we don't want to see is the Spiritborn getting nerfs and then all of the other character classes kind of staying the same. The hope is that we buff all of the other classes so that we can keep up with what we were seeing with the Spiritborn in the last season. I think that really would enhance the gameplay, and that would make everybody feel good about what they're doing. So with that being said, for today, we'll go over the Sorceress, then we'll take a look at some Season 7 feedback, and then we'll also give some general feedback as well, so stay tuned for that. With that, we'll dive into a pit just so that we kind of get an idea of what at least the new Lightning Ball Sorceress looks like, and then we'll jump into everything else after that. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so we're just going to test this out in a pit level 50. We just want to get an idea of how the gameplay is and how this is going to work. I will give some feedback in terms of power levels a little bit later, but for now, just wanted to show you guys these two new uniques that I think everybody's been excited about. The first one we're going to test out is the Oaken's Catalyst. This is the one that allows ball lightning to orbit around you, which is what replaced the gravitational force aspect. And then after that, we'll try out the strike of the Stormhorn. And so what I like about this one specifically is that you can move around and you can cast your lightning balls without having to stop, which makes it pretty efficient for speed farming if you've got the power to be able to handle the enemies that you're going up against. So a lot of fun. And also I've noticed that I've been able to have up to 18 ball lightnings out at one time, which is a little bit more than what we were able to do last season. So it seems like they're taking a page out of the broken ball lightning build with this guy, but it doesn't feel quite as powerful as that one did before. So again, feels like a lot of fun to play, and it is something that I definitely would recommend. However, this is something that we want to further test in higher level pits. As of right now, I've only been able to take this up to a level 65 pit and easily be able to do it. Beyond that, it does struggle a little bit and it does take a little bit more time. So when it comes down to opportunity, it does seem like there's some opportunity when we're looking at power levels, but the look and feel of it is great, especially if you're using this for levels 1 to 60. So with that, let's go back to town and let's swap out our unique so we can try the strike of the Stormhorn. Alrighty, so we are going to be testing this out in a pit tier 50 once again, which is equivalent to Torment 3. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can get too far with this specific build at this time into Torment 4, so I definitely have not been able to get to pit tier 100. 65 is the maximum I've been able to get up to, and it's quite a shame because we are using mythic uniques that have GAs on it, and they have been masterworked all the way up, so we really should feel quite powerful even though we're only at Paragon level 205. So when it comes to power, I don't feel like we're getting nearly as much as what we would expect to at this point, especially again with having mythic uniques, and we've got some pretty good items on here, but there is still some opportunity with Paragon and with getting those GAs. Now, with this specific unique, what I do like is we technically are getting two aspects in one with this, and that's what a unique should feel like. It should feel like something that gives you a significant power boost, but also you should be able to visibly see that additional power boost that you're getting. And so I think this one is really great because we're getting splash damage, and you can see the splash with ball lightning. And then we're also getting the super ball lightning as well, which additionally increases your damage overall. So this is exactly what a unique should look like, and this is what it should feel like. I really do think this is a great item, but is this going to be enough to be able to save the Sorceress altogether and be able to compete with the other character classes, especially something like the Spiritborn? And so far, the answer is no. Since I haven't been able to really get past pit tier 65, it's not feeling quite as strong, but I will say it does feel really good from level 1 to 60, where we're getting a variety of builds that we can play, and also you're not feeling like you're pigeonholed into using as many defensive skills as possible. So that being said, let's go ahead and give this a try. Now, one thing I will mention with this in comparison to the Oaken's Catalyst is this does not allow you to shoot while you're moving. So it does stop you along the way. slowing you down a little bit, but like I said, it still feels really good. And as you can see on the screen, it feels like there's a lot of things that are happening at the same time, and that always feels good in an RPG game, especially when you're playing a mage or a sorcerer character class generally. So it feels good, it looks good, the power feels good at this level, but I think there's still a lot more work to be done to have this at a level that can compete with characters like the Spiritborn. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy the Spiritborn. I loved it in the previous season. It just didn't feel good that we were forced to use that one class. Yes, we could play other characters, but if you're not able to keep up with pit tiers 120 plus, then it really defeats the purpose of having a powerful character, and it forces you into using something that you may not necessarily want to use for the entire season. And so that's where having class variety really comes in handy. I want to feel like I can switch between characters and still be able to complete the same level of content that I could with a character that I really enjoy or with my favorite one. And so in this season, I'm hoping that we'll get balances, and it should be balanced across all of the classes. As we've seen in previous seasons, it's always one character that outdoes all of the other ones. We've seen that with the Barbarian. We've once seen that with the Ball Lightning Sorceress at the beginning as well, but we're just not getting that balance across the board, and I think that's what the target needs to be overall. So with that being said, let's go back to town. I want to share with you guys some of my personal feedback and what I've encountered. And if this is not the same experience that you guys are having, please let me know in the comments below what you guys are seeing, or if you guys are enjoying this so far. All right, so some pros of the Sorceress at this point in the PTR is the new uniques. These feel really good. It feels like it's something that's been missing from the Sorceress, and it's something that should be implemented overall. And I think they did a really great job with these two specifically. The Strike of Stormhorn feels really good. The Oaken's Catalyst also feels really good as well. What I don't like is that you can't use both of them together. While that may overpower the character, and that does make sense, I get that, it would feel really nice to be able to have some kind of a combination for these, but nonetheless, I do think that these uniques feel really good at this point, and I definitely do see myself using something like this if the Sorceress is powerful enough to play in the next season, and that's also assuming that I will be playing next season. Another thing that I do like is some of the new aspects. And so one of them specifically is the Vehement aspect, which gives you an additional 30% times damage for 8 seconds when casting an ultimate skill, which is really good because this incentivizes using an ultimate skill. While lightning skills have traditionally used unstable currents in the past, that really hasn't been a problem, but this really incentivizes it. And to go a step further than that, it also gives you an additional +4 to your ultimate skill rank. So I really like this. The issue is that because of the new uniques we have, and because we're almost required to use some of these mythic uniques as well, it doesn't give very many slots to be able to implement these into. So we are having to sacrifice some of the other good aspects that we've used previously, and it almost renders these aspects useless because we are seeing more power from these uber mythics or from these uniques overall. And I'm not saying by any means that we should remove these uniques. However, there needs to be a way where we can still use these aspects without necessarily sacrificing any power, or to give us that variety that we're really looking for. And so my suggestion for something like that, especially for the Sorceress, is maybe adding an additional enchantment slot that would allow you to use a different aspect. I think that would be really helpful. Or potentially adding new rune words that would allow you to select aspects that you have currently and implementing those into your existing equipment, whether it's a unique or whether it's a legendary. I think this would be a really great way to utilize the additional aspects we have without necessarily having to sacrifice something that's already in place. And so this would let us use the aspects and not just let them go to waste, while again feeling that power boost from utilizing things like the Strike of Stormhorn. I think this is a really great idea, and I think this would A, give us a nice power boost that we need, B, give us a little bit more variety overall, and C, take advantage of something that's existing but not able to utilize quite as heavily as we'd like to. Now, the other thing that I'm liking so far, and separate from the Sorceress specifically, is I am really enjoying the witchcraft options. While this does kind of feel like a ripoff of the vampiric season where we got the vampiric powers, that was one of my favorite seasons overall, and you can really feel that power boost that you're getting by utilizing these. And so I haven't had a chance to play with all of these so far, but these feel really good, and it's something that I'm super excited about. There's a lot more that's going on the screen, which I think is really exciting, but it also adds to our overall power. I especially like the Doom Orb, which looks really cool, especially while using the Oaken's Catalyst. You've got your lightning balls flying around, and you also have this Doom Orb that's flying around, so I think that that feels really good. So far, I do definitely like these witch powers. I will say it feels like these work really well, especially in the lower levels, as you can immediately feel a power boost coming from these. So really, really fun. I really do enjoy it. Another thing I really like so far about the season is the additional content that they've put out. Now, instead of just having just the Hell Tides and then one additional area where you can go and do Outer World stuff, they've actually added several different Outer World things that you can do. Granted, it is kind of like multiple Hell Tides, but it does give you something to do in different areas of the map, so you're not forced to only go to one area, giving you a little bit more to do here. So I really do like that. I do think that they should include more Outer World things to do, especially more different Outer World activities that can engage people, especially because that can help incentivize players to play with each other and start parties. Now, I don't think that you should be forced to be in a party in order to complete certain types of content. I think that we should be able to complete any content without having to be in a party, but if you'd like to, there should be more options of things that we can do while in a party. I do like the party find feature, but I do feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done with that in order for it to work the way that we would want it to. Now, going back to feedback for the Sorceress specifically, like I mentioned, I'm really liking the new uniques. I think this is great. I think we need to see more uniques that are specific to other types of builds that we can utilize so that we have options. It feels like once we get to level 60, we are forced to use a specific build in order for us to be able to progress further into the content. I do think there needs to be more variety for this, and a great way to do it is very similar to what they did with the Strike of Stormhorn and the Oaken's Catalyst, but tailoring that towards other builds, maybe focusing on a Blizzard build or potentially a Fireball build, something a little bit different. But I do think that Sorceress overall needs a rework that will be able to cater to all of the different builds we can use and just give us that variety we're looking for. Speaking of variety, it does feel like we have variety from level 1 to 60 as we're going through and leveling up. So that part does feel good. But like I mentioned, once we get to the endgame content, it does not feel very good to be able to play a Incinerate Sorceress or maybe a Blizzard Sorceress. We're forced to just play the same things because it's either that or you can't progress. And then I briefly touched on this earlier for the Sorceress, but I do really think that the Sorceress does need a additional enchantment slot. And I know this was something that was covered during the launch of the expansion. They talked about, well, we don't want to add the additional enchantment slots, even though this is something that the players have been asking for because they feel like it would imbalance the class altogether. But I disagree with that. Right now, we're seeing that the Sorceress is almost forced to use all 4 of their defensives when you're getting to that end game content, which again doesn't feel good. All we're left with is one type of an attack that we can use, which does not really allow for the variety we're looking for. And so a suggestion may be adding a enchantment slot, but if balance is an issue, then potentially adding an enchantment slot that would only allow you to slot in a defensive skill. That way we can take it off of our skill bar and we can add a different skill to it, enhancing our power further, but still getting that defensive coverage that we need as well. I think this would be a really great idea and a great addition to the Sorceress class altogether. So that is my feedback on the Sorceress so far. Like I mentioned, I think there's some really great stuff going from levels 1 to 60. Endgame feels a little bit difficult to play with right now, and who knows when the season actually launches. Hopefully we'll see some more buffs to this, but from what I've heard, historically, we tend to see more nerfs after the PTR, so really hoping that this is something that Blizzard can focus on this time around and really work on getting fixed, especially with PoE 2 coming out. I've heard a lot of players are going to be jumping ship and going over to that. Personally, I've never played PoE. I tried it for the first time yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. It felt nostalgic. It felt more like Diablo 2 than anything else, but I think Blizzard has a lot of work to do in order to make sure that they keep their players playing. Otherwise, PoE 2 seems like they're ready to go, and again, it seems like a lot of streamers and a lot of players are going to be switching over to that. So we'll see what the season looks like. Now, taking a look at some season feedback specifically, As I mentioned earlier, I'm really enjoying the witchcraft powers. I think this is really good. It especially feels good at lower levels, which helps you progress through those beginning stages, whether you're in a party or whether you're playing by yourself. It feels like you're making progress and pretty quickly at that. So the witchcraft powers, I think they're really great. I think they should look at potentially enhancing them for the endgame content as well, but so far it's feeling really good. Drop rates are feeling pretty appropriate as well so far, especially for the lower levels. As I got this started, I leveled up manually from 1 to 30, and it felt like I was leveling up pretty quick. But once you start to get those legendary items, you really can feel a huge power increase from where you're at by just equipping one legendary aspect. So I think that's really good. I ran into a couple of goblins as I was going through the new Outer World seasonal stuff and immediately dropped a legendary. Like I mentioned, I do feel like this feels great, and I do think that the 1 to 60 experience is really good so far. So I will give them that much. I also do love the ability to be able to cash in whispers without having to go back to the tree. So they redid the entire tree area, which I think is really great. Now you can go there for your witchcraft upgrading ability, and I think that's awesome. And then while we're going through the outer world stuff, we're able to cash in our hell tides there, and I think that's really good. It allows you to keep moving without necessarily having to go all the way over to the whispers, cash it in, and then go back to what you were doing. And then lastly, I also mentioned this earlier, I do love the multiple outer world zones that you can go to. It makes it so you're not in the same area for an extended period of time. If you don't want to be, you can switch back and forth. It gives you more stuff to do while you're in the outer world. But the con of that is that the outer world content basically feels like you're just playing the hell tides and there isn't really anything new. And so I am a little bit disappointed by that. While yes, they do have the witchcraft stuff there and they've got a couple of new monsters that are in the outer world area, it doesn't feel much different than just playing in the hell tides, and it doesn't really feel like new content. And so I think when we're looking at additional seasonal stuff, we should implement more things like strongholds or something a little bit different, just so that you can feel like you're doing something that's new. Right now, it doesn't really feel too new. And then the other part is the season feels like it's a little bit half-assed. It feels like they just took the vampiric season and then overlaid it on top of the new season and included a couple of new things and called it a day. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more that we get from each season that we haven't already seen or that's completely new. And right now, again, it just feels like it's the same thing that we've done before with just a slight enhancement. And so that's my feedback so far on season 7 of the PTR. I do enjoy some aspects of it, but I do think that other aspects could definitely use a little bit of reworking. And again, I think my biggest gripe is I really want to see balance across all classes. I really want to be able to go back and play my Sorceress again. It's my favorite class, but yet I don't feel like so far I'll be able to do that in the next season. So we'll see how that looks. Now, I do also have some overall comments I wanted to make about the game as a whole. One of the things is PTR. While I think PTR is a really great idea, this gives Blizzard an opportunity to test out some new things. It doesn't feel like there's that many people playing. Right now, I've seen a couple of people around me. There's not many people in the trade chat. It doesn't feel like anyone's playing, and my friend list has been pretty empty since I've started playing the PTR. So it seems to me like it's pretty dead, which also makes me feel like Diablo 4 is currently dead as well. We need a lot of help to get this turned around, and especially because we do have PoE 2 coming up. Like I said, a lot of players are going to be jumping ship, and let's be real, a lot of us are playing this because of the nostalgia, because we've played Diablo for a long time. But if we're not getting what we're asking for, what's to prevent us from switching to a different game and just completely dropping Diablo altogether? So definitely need some work there. The other thing is we've got bugs. The game has been out for over a year now, and we still are experiencing bugs left and right. For example, even just recording this video, when I went back to town from the pit, it took about 4 minutes for my character to go back to town because of some kind of a glitch. When I first started the PTR, I was not able to log into the game. I had to try 5 times and force close the game before I was able to even access it, and that's just a couple of different things. The other issue I was having is items that were dropping on the ground were not matching the items that I was actually picking up. And so that was a little bizarre because I've never seen that before, but it would say that there's a rare wand that dropped. I pick up the wand and somehow it's changed into a dagger or it's changed into a sword, which is really, really confusing. So There's still a lot of bugs, and for it to be over a year that the game has launched, it does not feel like this is acceptable to see at this point when other games are getting this figured out well before the game launches. It feels like the game has been slowly building, but the game should have already been completed before the game launched. But now we're about to go into season 7 and we're still having these crazy bugs with things that are very fundamental and basic. I get the new seasonal stuff that's coming out. We're expecting to see bugs with that, but things like loading screens or things like items dropping, we should not be having any issues or bugs with things like that. I mentioned character class balances. It doesn't feel balanced. It never has. There's always one class or one character that outdoes everything else, and that doesn't feel good. Last season, I loved playing with the Spiritborn. There was a lot of variety with the Spiritborn, and that's what every class should feel like. You should be able to change from Razor Wings to Rushing Claw to Toxic Skin, whatever you want, and still be able to feel like you're doing something in the game. But unfortunately, that's not the case. With most classes, you're forced to use one specific build or otherwise you can't handle the content, and that does not feel very good. And so my ask for seasons going forward is that we're really focusing on having that balance overall, so that way we can switch between characters, because I will tell you, I stopped playing season 6 right before I went out on my vacation because it's the same thing over and over. But if I was able to create an alt and start off with a Sorceress or maybe a Rogue, then I could play it all over again as if it's pretty much a brand new game, and it will keep me engaged for a little bit longer so I can continue playing. However, like I said, because of the imbalances that we have, I don't feel like I can do that, and it feels very pointless to switch over to a different character that cannot handle the same thing. And then another thing is tempering and masterworking. Tempering and masterworking costs so much in order to be able to take advantage of those things. For tempering, you're limited to how much tempering you can do. And so after spending all of those resources attempting to temper something and then even resetting it with the reset scroll, you're not guaranteed to be able to get the temper that you're looking for, which I get it. That's part of the RNG. So that is more okay. But then when we're looking at things like masterworking, it's extremely expensive to masterwork. It takes multiple different materials to do it and a lot of gold. But what's worse is when you're resetting a masterwork, it costs a lot of gold. And quite honestly, I don't have the time to go through and look for masterworking materials for a week so that I can try to masterwork something again, and only to land in the same space that I was at before all of that happened, which is still don't have what I need with masterwork. So I think, and a suggestion for masterworking maybe is, instead of randomly masterworking something, I think we should be able to select what we want masterwork, even if it costs significantly more and significantly more materials. At least I know for certain that all of this time that I'm spending collecting these materials is going to be used for what I'm looking to use it for. And so I think that, yes, maybe keep the random masterwork option at a cheaper rate, but maybe include an additional ability to masterwork something specific. If I want Ball Lightning to cast twice, I should be able to select that and then say, hey, this is going to cost you X amount more materials and X amount of gold. I would be much more okay with that, and it would feel better. It does not feel like my work is going to waste and my time is being wasted by doing something like that. So definitely a lot of opportunities still with tempering and masterworking. The other feedback I have is Uber bosses and also the storyline behind the Uber bosses. So I think Varshan started out great. There was a great story behind it, and it was really challenging to do when it first came out, and I think this is really great. But then you look at the additional Uber bosses that we get afterwards, and Duriel and Andariel don't have a story. They just appeared out of nowhere at some point, and it just doesn't really make sense when there's a lot that's being left on the table with this, and a lot of opportunity to add additional interaction, to add a little bit more storyline to it. And I also think that we should add an additional Uber boss pretty much every season. And if we get to a point where maybe we have too many, then potentially replace them to keep it feeling fresh. And so that being said, I really think that Uber bosses need an overhaul altogether. Uber bosses should be pretty challenging. I don't think that there should be any class in the game that can one-shot an Uber boss. What's the point of that? It doesn't make it feel like an Uber boss if you could just take them down in one hit. And then also seasonal content. So while I think the Outer World stuff is really great, and this is something that we've been asking for, like I mentioned earlier, it feels like this outer world experience is the same as the Helltide experience. It's on a timer. Once the timer runs out, then it goes over to a new area and it just kind of keeps going, and it's the same thing. So when we're looking at seasonal content, I think we should include a little bit more and even more backstory to it as well. Next up, we have the skill tree and the Paragon board. Personally, and this might be controversial, but I do really enjoy the new Paragon board. I think it's great. I do like that the maximum boards you can have is 5. It allows you to really hone in on the ones that you're selecting. It allows you to maximize on the ones that you're selecting. There's some really good options, and I especially love the glyphs being able to go up to level 100. It keeps you going back into the pit so you can continue to upgrade those. So I think that part is really great. What is not great is the skill tree. When we look at other ARPGs and when we look at the skill trees, there's a lot more options that we get, and there's many different ways to customize the build that you're looking for. When we look at Diablo 4, there isn't really much. It's not even a full tree because we really don't get too many options we can play with. And the options we have, like I mentioned earlier in the video, we only get to use those from level 1 to 60 because beyond that, we're forced to pick one specific build that's effective and everything else is just kind of there. And so I think the entire skill tree for every character needs a complete overhaul. I think we need to add some new skills. I think we need to add some additional variety and make it a little bit more fun to play with and give us the ability to choose what we want versus pigeonholing us into what works and what doesn't. So I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to the skill tree. Again, great job with the Paragon board, but I think we need to generally just revisit the skill tree for all the character classes and redo it. This was really helpful in Diablo 3 when we went into the Diablo 3 expansion. They redid some skills, which really did feel good at that point. So Blizzard, I think this is something we need to revisit here as well and redo it just generally. And lastly, players are feeling really ripped off from the expansion after spending a large amount of money purchasing the expansion, which is set to be one of many to come, hopefully. But after spending that kind of money on it, we expect a little bit more. And the part that felt like a ripoff, the story is supposed to be about Mephisto. And while we do follow Mephisto, we didn't get to fight Mephisto in his true form. We got to fight him in his wolf form, which is cool, and I think that could have been made a seasonal boss, but unfortunately, we don't actually get to take him down. So the whole expansion being about Mephisto, we would expect to have taken Mephisto down, or at the very least have introduced Baal and Diablo as they did in Diablo 2, and then maybe finish them off in the next expansion. But we didn't get an introduction to Diablo, we didn't get an introduction to Baal, we don't know what's happening next, and it just didn't feel good. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done there too. I think in the expansion, we should have finished the Mephisto story, or at the very least, like I mentioned, have seen the resurrection of the other two brothers. That would make it feel a little bit more complete. I don't think we should have to purchase another expansion just to complete that story. That does not feel good, and I don't personally like that. And so what can be done is maybe in the next season, reintroduce Mephisto and then introduce Baal and Diablo as well. That way we can keep the story going. I'm okay with us getting another expansion so we can tell the Diablo and the Baal story, but it just felt like this expansion was incomplete and left us at a cliffhanger. In fact, once we got to the final battle and we completed it, it all of a sudden said, "You've completed Vessel of Hatred," but I felt like there was something that was missing. So again, a lot of feedback and a lot of things that need to be worked on. I think the next season does have some potential, but as of right now, I'm not feeling too great about it. And like I mentioned, it doesn't feel like there's too many people that are playing right now either. So that's a little bit discouraging to see. I think if we can give Blizzard more feedback on what we want to see, hopefully they'll listen and we'll have a better experience overall. So with that, I am going to try out the other characters as well, and I will share additional feedback on those individual character classes as well. I am excited to try them, but my hope is that I won't be left disappointed, and I really want to be excited to play the next season. So stay tuned for the new videos coming out over the next few days. If you guys like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below so I can continue making additional videos like this. Thanks for joining me, Wonders, and until next time.